Welcome. Good afternoon. In spite of all the efforts and machinations that the United States has employed to overthrow the democratically elected president of Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro was recently installed for a third term. According to a great article in Orinoco Tribune entitled Venezuelan President Maduro Assumes a Third Term, Prospects and Problematics, it reads as follows, quote, from its inception with the election of Hugo Chavez in 1998, the U.S. has interfered in and attempted to overthrow by extra legal means Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution. Tragically, U.S. unilateral coercive measures, i.e., sanctions alone, have caused an estimated 100,000 deaths. So, where do Venezuelans go from here? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Good afternoon again, and welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they take place in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that are impacting the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is the U.S. claims to be the defender of democracy, but tries, and in the case of Ukraine successfully, to overthrow socialist democracies that it perceives to be threatening. What are we to make of these dangerous and glaring hypocrisies? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're waiting on our guest who, unfortunately, is joining us. Well, not unfortunately that he's joining us from Paris, France. The unfortunate part is that at the moment he is stuck in a horrible traffic jam in Paris, and so he's going to be joining us shortly. And so while we're waiting, let's look at a couple of other issues that have been reported on today. This I find to be very, very interesting, and that is, this is from the Washington Post. China seeks DeepSeek AI app sends U.S. tech stocks reeling. Leaders in Silicon Valley and Washington said the app shows China can challenge the U.S. in AI. The sudden popularity of a Chinese artificial intelligence app called DeepSeek pummeled stocks and captivated Silicon Valley today, prompting debate in political and tech industry circles about how the U.S. can maintain its lead in AI. The DeepSeek app rocketed to the top of the downloads chart in the Apple Store today after its release last week by a Chinese startup of the same name that was founded in 2023. It offers similar functionality to OpenAI's popular ChatGPT chatbot, answering questions and generating text in response to a user's queries. This, to me, is interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, because the headline says that leaders in Silicon Valley and Washington said the app shows China can challenge the U.S. in AI. Well, after China took the lead in developing 5G technology and the United States still can't even offer 4G in reality, what would make anybody think that China cannot challenge the U.S. in AI? That's one of the things that this comes as some surprise when China has, over the last 15 to 20 years, been able to develop some of the best software engineers on the planet. What would make anybody in the United States think that China couldn't do this? In fact, if you really know the history of the development of 5G, you would know that I'd say probably about 15 to 20 years ago, China came to the United States and offered to work with the US in developing 5G technology. If you remember IT, the Internet of Things, as you're supposed to be able to communicate, for example, communicate with your refrigerator through your phone. If you're on your way home from work and you're out of milk, your refrigerator would message your phone, you need to stop by the grocery store and get some milk, for example. There's supposed to be all of this interconnectivity between devices, the Internet of Things. And China is at the lead of developing that technology. And 5G technology is supposed to be one of the huge steps towards that development. And China reached out to the United States asking to work with the US in a joint venture to develop the technology, and the United States said no. And so so China went ahead and with the development on its own. And then once China got there in terms of developing, making incredible advances in 5G technology, the United States then started crying foul. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to communicate with my guest. So China, the United States started crying foul that China was stealing ideas and doing all of this other stuff, which we now know was untrue. So all of that to say, what would make the United States surprised that that China has been able to make the advancements that it has made, especially when now you have folks like Peter Thiel in Silicon Valley, and you have Elon Musk asking for more H-1B waivers because they need to bring in more visas, H-1B visas, because they need to bring in more foreign engineers because there aren't enough American engineers to work on these projects. So if the United States doesn't have the domestically, organically taught and grown engineers, and they have to go outside the country to do this, then is it any surprise that China would be able to surpass the United States in the development of these technologies? I think not. In fact, as I said in the open, as the United States is still struggling to generate 5G, even though it says on your phone that it is 5G, that's not really true. That's just faster 4G is what you're getting on your phone. What would make you think that China couldn't do it? Holistic Politics says, I heard it was also an all-Chinese team of developers having been trained and worked in China. No foreign strings attached. I think that's true. Easy D says China has even developed a language translator you wear around your neck and enables you to communicate using in almost all languages. That is true. So, and again, we can go to the Huawei. I think it's the Mate 60 phone, the Huawei phone. Contrary to popular belief, it is not the iPhone that is the cellular telephone standard around the world. It is Huawei, the phone that you can't get in the United States because the United States has banned Huawei products on our shores. But it's the Huawei, I think it's the Mate 60 phone that has not only cellular technology, but also has satellite technology embedded in the phone, as we were talking about last week, that when you find yourself out in the Serengeti in Tanzania and you're, however far away from a cell tower, you are not out of contact because you can use satellite technology on a cellular telephone. That, mind blowing. It was China when a whole lot of engineers thought that you would never be able to send transmissions from the dark side of the moon. China broke through that window and is now able to communicate from the dark side of the moon. They're all over the place in terms of technology, and they're also again trying to work cooperatively with other countries in these technological breakthroughs, because they employ what they call a win-win strategy. They want to work with countries, not capture, not exploit, not dominate countries. Unfortunately, the United States can't seem to figure that out. JJ Mars says Elon just wants a supply of cheap labor. That is true. JJ Mars, that is very true. That is one of the elements, or one of the reasons why they are so hell-bent on getting more of these H-1B visas. But there is also a reality here that there aren't enough engineers available to do the kind of work that they believe needs to be done. And it's also ironic that with this reality that the United States is lacking in the number of and quality of engineers, that Donald Trump still somehow wants to shut down the Department of Education. That makes no sense. Easy D says China is decades ahead of the U.S. in many areas of AI technology. Not only AI technology, but electric car technology, in bullet train technology. There are all kinds of things that that China is just out there kicking hind parts and taking names in terms of where it is, because they don't employ what's the word I was looking for? Oh shoot, I just lost the well, they don't use, capitalism in the same manner that the United States uses capitalism. And what I mean by that is they have what they call it China has they employ capitalism, what do they say, with Chinese factors or Chinese elements. So it's not all profit taking. What China does with the companies in China is they allow for profit taking, but only up to a certain point. They have to reinvest those profits into R&D. They have to reinvest those profits into the development of the country. Extractive, that's the word I was looking for. So it's not just solely extractive capitalism where Lockheed Martin or Westinghouse or whoever the American corporation is, where they look merely at shareholder value and extract the profit from the corporation and then just pay shareholders increased dividends. There are percentages of those profits that get reinvested into the country so that, for example, they can help to move 750 million people out of abject poverty, and the United States can't even deal with 800,000. So those are just a couple of examples, but I just find it very interesting that and AI, in terms of being a marketed product, is a relatively new product. It's not, AI is not that old in terms of how it's being marketed today, what we understand its abilities to do. You see, for example, that Google commercial where this woman is lying on a bed and she's talking with her telephone as though the phone is actually a person. She's having a real-time engaging, now I don't know who in the hell would want to do this, but a real-time engaging conversation with an instrument, with a telephone. Who would want to do that? Who is so removed from personal interaction that you would prefer to talk to a device instead of talking to me? That makes absolutely no sense to me. That boggles my mind. Again, yes, China is ahead, not just in AI. Trump and his cronies from JJ Mars will blame DEI and affirmative action on the lack of American know-how. Oh, there's no question. There's no question about that. Marcia, you are more than welcome. I do my best to keep you all informed. Thank you. It's capitalism with Chinese characteristics. Thank you. That's what I was struggling for. See, y'all are on top of the game. I appreciate that. Yes. China says that they have capitalism with Chinese characteristics, which enables them not only to extract profit, but to grow the country at the same time that individuals are benefiting from their investments and from their efforts. And, to that point, Donald Trump now has been talking about international corporations bringing their manufacturing to the United States. And he says that as though that's something, first of all, very easy to do. That's the first mistake he's making, as though they can just pull up stakes, come to the United States, open up a plant, and things start flowing. And he also speaks about this in a context as though this is a way to regenerate manufacturing in the United States. But I think individuals such as Professor Linwood Tawhid will tell you that when you don't have industrial policy, when you really don't have industrial policy in your country, it is, I would say, virtually impossible for companies to do what Donald Trump claims can be done. Yes, Sherry, I think Trump is delusional, and this is an example of it. So, for example, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan, other car manufacturers, they can and have open up plants in the United States. There's already American industrial capacity for car manufacturing. So they go down to Arkansas, or they go to Mississippi, or they seem to be gravitating towards southern states because those are right to work states. They don't have to deal so much with union issues in states like that. And so they can complement, I think that's a good word to use, they can complement the already existing car manufacturing industry in the United States. But thank you, Cherie, Alabama. When you start talking about producing high-level chip manufacturing, as is being done right now with TSC in Taiwan, no, you can't. It takes hundreds of millions of dollars to develop that kind of technology creation in the United States. And without an industrial policy, how do you develop long-term? How do you create the base? How do you develop the base? How do you develop upon the base and grow without a vision, without an industrial policy? How do you do that? Especially after all of the years that the United States has wasted with its extractive capitalism, with its outsourcing of the American industrial mindset and capacity to foreign countries such as China, such as Vietnam, such as India. You can't just turn this around on a dime. You just can't do that. It takes, first of all, vision from a president to say, such as John Kennedy said in 1961, we're going to the moon. And, he said, within the next 5 years, we're going to have a man on the moon. It takes a visionary to say, we are going to reestablish in the United States, we are going to establish in the United States, or reestablish in the United States, a manufacturing base. Here are the things, here's where we're going to start. Here's how we're going to do it. Cherie asks, did TSC ever open up in the United States? No, they did not. To my knowledge, they spent millions of dollars, I want to say in Arizona, trying to open up a plant in Arizona, only to find out that the United States didn't have the horsepower, doesn't have the engineers, doesn't have the vision necessary to open up and develop that kind of manufacturing. And remember, Cherie, and thank you for asking that question. Remember, the real motivation behind the United States trying to entice TSC to open up a plant here was in anticipation of China taking over Taiwan. There were those in the United States, there was a plan that if the United States got the sense that China was about to invade Taiwan, that the United States would blow up the TSC manufacturing facilities in Taiwan and move those facilities to the United States. Now, whether or not they actually were going to do that, I can't say, but I do know that there were published reports from very reliable sources that was one of the plans that the U.S. was trying to implement. So now, with that being said, it looks as though my guest has made it through the horrific traffic jam through Paris, and let me do this so that he'll understand exactly where I'm coming from. Let me go back to the top. In spite of all the efforts and machinations that the U.S. has employed to overthrow the democratically elected president of Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro was recently sworn in for a third term. And we know that there was a great article in the Orinoco Tribune entitled "Venezuelan President Maduro Assumes a Third Term, Prospects and Problematics." And it says, from its inception with the election of Hugo Chavez in 1998, the U.S. has interfered and attempted to overthrow by extra-legal means Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution. And As the United States claims to be the defender of democracy, but tries, and in the case of Ukraine, successfully overthrew the socialist democracy in Ukraine, it perceives socialist democracies to be threatening. And let's turn to my guest. He's a distinguished intellectual with an academic foundation in theoretical mechanics. He's the founder of the African Advisory Board, Francois
Yes, Ndengwe.
Ndengwe.
Yes, sir.
Francois, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my brother. Well, and thanks to all the listener and viewers.
And let me say, man, I really appreciate you going through all the efforts that you've gone through in order to get with us. First of all, it is late for you in Paris, and you went through some incredible traffic to join us. So I greatly appreciate it. So President Maduro has been sworn in for his third term. The U.S., many don't know this, slapped a $25 million bounty on his head and lesser amounts for other Venezuelan leaders. And as a side note, the CIA had a $10 million bounty on the head of Abu Muhammad al-Jilani, the emissary of Islamic State founder Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. But once al-Jilani helped the United States overthrow Syria, they changed his name to Ahmed al-Shara, and now there's no bounty because he's now an ally of the United States, even though he's chopping heads in the town squares and in villages in Syria. With that having been said, give us your thoughts on Nicolás Maduro being sworn in for his third term as the president of Venezuela.
Thank you very much. I was privileged to attend the ceremony of the inauguration. It was a wonderful ceremony of a people acclaiming its leader. It is unfortunate that the United States is continuing to behave, I think the government of the United States, I should specify, is continuing to behave aggressively as it is behaving against the people and the leaders of Venezuela. The leaders that the people of Venezuela freely chose through free and fair elections. And what you have said, brother, Will, at the beginning is critical. And let me say two words about it. You rightfully contrast the situation in Syria with a criminal, a terrorist who had a bounty on his name and who was added to reach power with who we know. You mentioned the fact that these criminals have been chopping the heads. I want to tell you very specifically, if you remember, in the shores of in Egypt, these are the people who were boasting and aligned some tens of Africans, mostly from Ethiopia, but not only from Ethiopia. They brought it with camera. They nailed them in the front of all the world, and they were happy to chop their heads one by one. We as African, we will never accept that type of behavior. The behavior of the United States with this, after the genocide that they have been supporting in Gaza, and then now bringing to power someone who openly was boasting and show it to the world with a camera. They were filming how they were chopping the heads of Africans. I don't think that any African of conscience, any Africans who have a mind, who have a brain, and who have a heart, will ever support this distasteful behavior of the United States of America. That being said, let us come back to what happened in Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
Since Commander Chavez came to power with a people revolution, a people reclaiming what they had, reclaiming the products of their resources, reclaiming the fruits of the labor. And the United States have been antagonizing the people of Venezuela and the will of the people of Venezuela. If what we call democracy has a meaning, and if we are not just playing with words, shouldn't the United States support what is happening, support the will of the people? But of course, no, because it is in the very nature of the government of the United States, since its inception, to oppose those who stand for the people, those who stand for common good. And to finish, I just want to give one example, and then they will come back to the issue of Venezuela. Look at what happened in Haiti. We know that the people of Haiti fought some 13 years war of independence, and they were independent on the 1st of January 1804, if I'm not wrong. Correct me. I think you're better equipped here.
That sounds about right. That's close enough.
And the United States, who pretend in its Declaration of Independence that all people, everybody, they are standing for freedom. It took the United States almost 60 years, 6 decades, to recognize the government of the free people of Haiti. So we are not surprised by this behavior of the US government, but unfortunately for them, I think that they will fail.
The United States has gone through an awful lot of tactics. You mentioned that President Maduro was elected in free and fair elections. We know how many years ago was it that Jimmy Carter went to Venezuela as an election observer, part of an international delegation to observe the Haitian elections. And President Carter was very clear. Those elections were the freest and fairest elections that he has ever participated in. There's an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation that the Western media has been espousing about Venezuela, things that just flat out are not true. The elections, the imposing Juan Guaido on behalf of the Venezuelan, or trying to impose Juan Guaido on behalf of the Venezuelan people, stealing the Venezuelan embassy, stealing the Citgo oil company from Venezuela, stealing Venezuelan gold in London banks that was part of the Venezuelan sovereign fund. I mean, there have just been all kinds of tactics that the United States has been involved in trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela.
Yes, indeed. And this is a part of, let's say, a recipe that the world now knows very well. And this, to the detriment of the reputation of the United States of America. Maybe that in the past, they could not care about their reputation. In Africa, we know exactly what they did. Since Eisenhower directed the assassination of Patrice Lumumba on January the 17th, 1961. This is a coup by the CIA, an African who was elected by its people, but because he stood for the common good, I have said, the United States had organized a coup and assassinated him. We know what the US did against Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana in February 1966. But what is specific with the case of Venezuela, which is very interesting, and which is a lesson for us in Africa, is that up to now, they have been successfully resisting, repelling all these attacks, all these tactics. Let me say again that what you have mentioned rightfully, the reserve that they took over, and the money that they took. We should call it a spade a spade. This is an act of thievery.
Yes.
There is no legal foundation for that.
It's actually an act of war, is what it is. Beyond being an act of thievery, it's an act of war.
Exactly. You're right. In fact, I'm not a specialist in international law, but what you say, I concur. There is absolutely the U.S. government officials, the Blinkens and so on, the Victoria Nuland and so on. They used to say, "Oh, the rule-based order." If the rule-based order, but they don't respect any law. So we, the people of the Venezuela, what I wanted to stress, and that really impressed me, is the quality, the fighting spirit that I discovered. And I'm sure that they will resist again. And this is teaching lesson that is reverberating in Africa. For instance, there were at this inauguration, there were many delegations from Africa. I saw people from South Africa. I saw people from Angola, from Burkina Faso. And let me stop a minute on Burkina Faso.
Okay.
Burkina Faso, as you're following the news, is part of 3 countries, the other 2 being Mali and Niger, who have formed a confederation in the Sahel, the Confederation of Sahel States.
Mm-hmm.
This is a game changer in African politics. These are, we can call them a revolutionary path towards the real freedom and independence in Africa. Oh, we remember the so-called independence of the 1960s, where, as some people say, flag independence.
Right.
We just have the flag. We sit at the United Nations organization at New York City. We have representation, we have embassies, but the substance of sovereignty was lacking. So these 3 states are now engaging in it. And my surprise in Caracas was to see a substantial delegation from Burkina Faso attending this ceremony and coming to learn from the people of Venezuela. And to what I've heard recently, and this is to maybe a scoop, President Maduro may pay a visit in the coming month to Burkina Faso.
Oh.
I think that this is very good. Very good. This is some of the revival of what we saw during the Bandung conference, so that the progressive forces, or if you want, the revolutionary forces from Africa, will join hands with those of the Americas, being the North, like you, or those in the Latin and southern part of America, to fight imperialism. And I think this is something that is very good. We want a fair word. We are not here to impose our view to anyone. We just want a word in which country will be respected, and we will have to focus our attentions to the common threat to humanities, and these threats can be named very easily: poverty, climate change, hunger, education, and progress in the health and healthcare, providing universal healthcare for all, no matter, regardless of your wealth. So these are the type of thing. These are the recent development that makes us very confident. I think that the United States has been totally misguided in terms of its policy in Africa. If we have time one day, I will come down to it, because this is something that I have documented. They are disgracing themselves. They don't know what they are, digging the proper hole, and they will never recover if they don't change radically. And I don't think that it is with President under President Trump that we will see that change.
And I'll be more, let's go in that direction. But before we get there, there are a couple of things I wanted to point out about Venezuela. You talked about the support that Venezuelans have for President Maduro. And I like to say, and please correct me, that the support that Venezuelans have for President Maduro is not for him as a personality. It is for him as the bearer of the torch for the revolution. That if Maduro were to start to violate the principles and the precepts of the Bolivarian revolution, the people would throw him overboard faster than you can say throw Nicolás Maduro overboard. And that there is a militia to demonstrate, or an example of how committed the Venezuelans are. The government has armed individual Venezuelans as a militia. That means that the government must really trust the people and trust that the people won't turn those guns on the government. Francois.
My brother, you are putting the finger on the critical point that has two parts. The first part is the word you use, which is trust. And you could feel the trust in the street of Venezuela during the inaugurations. I have never attended an inauguration like that. We saw the recent inauguration of President Trump in Washington. The whole city was almost barricades.
Correct.
You see gunmen every corner, at every corner until K Street and or 7th Street. All the way around barricaded. And then this was in a rotunda. This was not in the open air.
Correct.
It is unfortunate that they don't advertise, and you can see and watch what happened in Caracas that day. There were millions of people in the street. You could barely see, and at this I was impressed as an African. You know, in Africa, all those dictators are afraid. They have guns everywhere. The security
many of them are puppets of the United States, and they aren't operating. For example, they aren't operating in the interest of the people. William Ruto in Kenya is an example of a puppet president that is not well liked in his own country.
Yes, they could not do what I saw I was an eyewitness. President Maduro was in the crowd. This is an inauguration in the crowd. At a certain time, I was no further than 2 meters from President Maduro's. I was really impressed. You barely see a security, but I did not see a single gun. So if you are afraid, if you know that you are not the president, you have rigged the elections, the people do not like you, I don't think that you can do things like that. So this is on your first point on the issue of trust. It means the president trusts the people and the people trust the president. This is a two-way trust, which is the cement that it impressed me in Venezuela. The second part of your observation is related to the ideology, and the level of ideology conscience in Venezuela really impressed me. It means that, as you rightfully say, President Maduro cannot play. He cannot deviate from the path that Hugo Chavez started in 1998. This is a part of people who are taking back the wealth. This is a part of for a government that is there to redistribute the wealth to the needy. This is a part of they call this the socialism, as they say. So I don't see how a President Maduro, who will come into doing things that is not aligned with implementing the policy that is not aligned with the general trust of revolution will stay in power. That is to say, this is not a cult of personality. And I will add one last thing.
Mm-hmm.
There was also, during those days, the inauguration was on the 10th of January. But from the 9th to the 11th, there was an international conference against fascism. And here you could see that Maduro was not the centerpiece, even though he came at the last stage. All the revolutionary figures of that part of America were there to show that Maduro is just coming in line with all these figures who showed their courage, who showed their dedication for the cause of the people. So you cannot try to pretend, and you cannot try to deviate. It will be very difficult for him to deviate from the path that the people ask him. It is not a dictatorship as they are pretending. I heard an interview by the new Secretary of State. I don't know what he knows really about Venezuela.
Very little.
Very little, but they will come to they will come to the reality. That's why I'm very confident that they will come to the reality. As they will see the reality in Africa, they will be surprised.
You know, in the midst of the sanctions regime imposed upon Venezuela by the United States, and let me just quickly say for those who may not realize this, that I can't think of one instance of the West imposing sanctions on a country where the sanctions have resulted in the desired outcome. Usually, my experience, my research has shown that sanctions actually help to solidify the position of the person in power, because it creates a heightened sense of nationalism and has the person in power say to the people, your suffering, your plight is not my fault. It's the United States imposing sanctions on us, and we must stand united to defeat the oppressor. Your thoughts on that point?
Yes. It's a long time, excuse me, but I no longer use the word sanction.
Okay.
I no longer use the word sanction. I have coined a term for that, but this is not the time. This is in my academic work.
Okay.
This is an act of thievery, and you should call it as it is.
Okay.
The only institution in international law that can take a sanction is the United Nations Security Council.
Mm-hmm.
When you say they are sanctioning, it's like a teacher sanctioning his pupils or his students.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a sanction. This is an act of, this is a burglar breaking your door to get in. And this is not...
It's an act of war through economic means.
Exactly. And this is not just a metaphor. Because as you said, the proclaimed goal was to harm the ordinary citizen,
mm-hmm.
to overthrow the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's the goal. But I don't remember anywhere where they succeeded. The most blatant example being the so-called my new coin word is what I call typhophobia, which I think from Russophobia. I have coined the word typhophobia, like because they typhophobia. So these so-called sanctions that they took against the Russian Federation,
mm-hmm.
which I call typhophobia, were supposed to excite the grievance of the Russian people, of the Russian citizens, to go out by millions and overthrow the Russian government. Has that happened?
No, the ruble has not been turned into rubble. That has not happened. In fact, it is one of the strongest currencies now in the world.
Thank you very much. So these people do not learn. And it is because they do not learn that they are doomed.
In fact, the issue on getting back to your point, the issue on sanctions also is because sanctions are a form of collective punishment, which established by the United Nations is a human rights violation, if not a war crime.
You're right. There are a number of academic works on that topic, and which goes exactly, we concur and support what you have just said.
And there's another example that I wanted to go back to in terms of the militia in Venezuela, how people are armed and how people support their government. Back, I want to say in 2020, Operation Gideon, where a number of American mercenaries tried to enter Venezuela through by sea. They tried to enter Venezuela in order to assassinate President Maduro. They were captured by Venezuelan fishermen who captured these trained American mercenaries and put them in jail. And so many have called this the Bay of Piglets. And I use that as an example to demonstrate how the Venezuelans will go through any means necessary to protect their government, to protect their revolution, to protect their president.
Let me tell you something. I'm very curious when I arrive at some place and I speak to everybody, to the maximum people. I'm open. I can speak. I can exchange with people. I spoke with the little boy, the little girl, the grown up, the teachers, in the street. That day, you can see all type of people, and the determination in their mind was terrible. And I'm not surprised that the fishermen could do that sort of a thing and capture trained mercenaries. And this happened in 2020, as you said. Remember, yes. Here there was a very important national election in Venezuela in 2020. It was the National Assembly elections. You remember?
Yes.
So this was a very critical year, and all the tension, all the strength of the United States, all the propaganda machines, were targeting Venezuela, but they resisted. And I don't think that if Venezuela, this was a very critical year for Venezuela, if they succeeded, and I think that it will not be possible for any further US government to succeed. You will have a bloodbath if you want to overthrow the government by the people. The people will go out. The level of courage that they showed, and they were all the more excited and ready to fight. Because, as you say, the very day of the inauguration, the US government issued that 25 million bounty for who will arrest, I think, President Maduro and 2 of his ministers. This is, and I cannot understand that people can behave like this in today's world.
You know, I think it's also important from a timing perspective to remember that was after the United States seized the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. That was after the United States had seized the assets of Citgo. That was after the United States had seized the gold in the London banks. That's when I believe that the collective punishment regime was at its worst. And it was shortly after that that Iran stepped in, opening up supermarkets in Venezuela, that the international community started to respond to the needs and the plight of the Venezuelans in support of the Venezuelan government.
Yes, you're mentioning what you say about Iran is absolutely clear. And by the way, there was also a very important Iranian delegation at that inauguration and during the International Anti-Fascist Conference. It is unfortunate, but people will continue to fight for the dignity. People will continue to fight for what belongs to them. The Venezuelan people are not claiming land in Washington or in Nebraska. They are not claiming any products of in the USA. They want to be free to use their resources, their natural resources, and the fruit of their labor to improve the conditions of the people. Is this complicated? So this is a very simple thing.
Well, wait a minute. It wasn't complicated it's not complicated in Venezuela. It wasn't complicated in Iran when the United States overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh in 1958. All he wanted to do was use the proceeds from Venezuelan oil to improve the standard of living and the quality of life for Iranians. And the United States was not going to allow that to happen.
Yes. Prime Minister.
That's why the program is called Connecting the Dots, because people have to understand that these things are interrelated.
Indeed, they are interrelated. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh they overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, and that they afterward they show not concern in showing that they are those who organized the coup. And if you remember, I watched a video of Bolton recently praising himself for being a coup organizer. I don't know if you watch. Praising himself for being a coup organizer. Mm-hmm. So people do not even hide what they do. But unfortunately, we see that for just his security and safety, the U.S. taxpayer is paying $20 million per year just to protect Mr. Bolton. And he was angry recently because, to what I've read, he will not receive that protection anymore. Correct. Because the connecting the dots is really an appropriate phrase here, because otherwise people will see events like they were popping up without any logical connection linking one event to another. So the same event, the same logic that brought Prime Minister Mossadegh down is the same logic that have been trying to apply to Venezuela since 1998, when Hugo Chavez came and he nationalized the oil field, like Mossadegh had nationalized the oil field in Iran. And this thing is, there is no arbitrary. You know that there is in the United Nations charters, any government has the right, for the purpose of increasing its people welfare, to nationalize any assets on its land. This is in accordance with law, and that's
one of the fundamental tenets of sovereignty. Is that a government within a defined geographic space is able to control the resources within that space and use force if necessary to do so.
Yes, the UN. This is a sanction by the UN. The UN authorized it, and Commandant Chavez used that part of the UN treaty to be able to nationalize. And we can even go back with the French revolutionaries. The French revolutionaries, I think they have in their the Declaration of the human and citizen rights on June 1793, you will see an article in this declaration saying that the government is entitled to take over any piece of land or anything, providing that it is for the common good.
In fact, in the United States, it's now called eminent domain. When the government decides it wants to put a freeway through Detroit, it just takes the land. It will pay usually pennies on the dollar. It did it in Oakland. It did it in it's called eminent domain.
You see, yes, that's so. There is nothing abnormal here. So Prime Minister Mossadegh was trying to take back what the British and the American we have been stealing from the people of Iran for decades. The Spain commanded Chavez, and now Maduro are taking back what belonged to the Venezuelan people. And that's what we're going to do also in Africa. Africa is coming.
One more point before we get to Africa, and you mentioned Haiti, but I think people really need to connect these dots between Venezuela's support of Haiti and the United States' frustration with Venezuela providing Haiti with oil below market value, so Haiti could sell oil, make a profit, support its own people, and improve the quality of life for people in Haiti. And we also, if we're talking about overthrowing governments, of course, you got to talk about Muammar Gaddafi being overthrown in Libya under Barack Obama. I mean, there are a lot of dots that we can connect there. But just quickly talk about what's going on in Haiti, because one of the things that I've been saying to my audience was when J.D. Vance started that lie about Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, eating people's pets, and then Donald Trump reiterates that lie during the debate, and Kamala Harris twists her face up so disgusting that he said that, as she rightfully should have. But nobody ever asked the question, why are the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio in the first place and not in their homes in Haiti? Francois.
Oh, the history of the relation between Haiti and the United States of America is one of the most painful to learn or to read. The United States was afraid from the very beginning when the slaves revolt in Haiti. They was afraid of a contamination, that the successful revolt of the slaves in Haiti would inspire the slaves in the United States of America. So they did everything, even to spread the news. Now,
No, go ahead.
So when under Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines, they succeeded, now the United States refused to recognize the government. And I say it took, I think, 58 years before the United States recognized the government of Haiti. Let us jump fast forward. The United States occupied the country for many years, exploited it, and we can name some banks, in particular in New York, that made a fortune out of the sweat and the resources of the Haitian. Economists can do the calculations, and I think that the debt they owe to the Haitian will come. Fast forward again, you know what happened during the Clinton and Hillary and even Bill, what they did in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember what this priest, the former priest, who Jean-Bertrand Aristide, and you know who overthrew him, in what conditions? Overnight, he found himself in Africa. The president chosen by the people of Haiti who for the first time was trying to improve the conditions of the people of Haiti. They overthrew him. They organized gang. They provided the weapons for it. They distort completely the functioning of the governments, of the institutions. Then you have, unfortunately, the earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
Even they use the earthquake to make money on the back, on the misery of the Haitians. So all these things.
Wait a minute. You say they, you're talking about Bill Clinton, you're talking about Barack Obama, you're talking about George W. Bush as the ringleaders behind the theft of the hundreds of millions of dollars that was raised in. They've only built, I think the number is 8 homes. With all that money that was raised, they were only able to construct 8 homes. And I also understand that the Clintons have been trying to build a private resort in Haiti because in anticipation of eventually the political dynamics shifting in favor of the West.
Yes. Thank you for that, for what you've just said on which is ongoing, and the specificity and providing the details to the listeners and the viewers, because these details are needed to connect the dots. That is the important thing. People need to have the information and react to it. And I give more academic work that I can cite on this topic, but I don't have it here.
Okay.
But to continue with the Haiti, all these things created a disorganized society where the government was no longer capable of maintaining order, was no longer capable of providing the basic necessity that the people need. Hence, people were migrating. And where is the closer place to go? Is either the United States or Canada. Unfortunately, you remember that when the Haitians were arriving, they were discriminated as black people in America, whereas all the white immigrants were accepted. So this is the thing that we should mention to show how the racist, the discrimination continue today. And finally, coming back to these pet issues. What a disgrace. What a disgrace. But in fact, they're disgracing themselves, if you know.
Mm-hmm.
We have this type of example also in France, when you may remember the Emperor Bokassa of the Central African Republic.
Mm-hmm.
A puppet, a distasteful puppet of the French government. But you know how these people do. They use you, and when you're no longer useful, they will smear you. They will so as long as he was a very obedient to his master, he was praised. The French government even spent money for his coronation. But when they decided they would overthrow him, they spread the news that he was eating babies, that they find fleshes of baby in his fridge. And French newspaper wrote it, French radios air it, and TVs. So, oh, this is a horrible criminal. The same person who a day before was their best friend, overnight became a horrible criminal who eats babies, who cut the fleshes, keep in the fridge to eat. So these pets, these Vance and Prom, repeating this horrible lie, they're doing a disservice to themselves. They're discrediting the United States, and they are not measuring. I think maybe they are living in a bubble. They are not measuring how they are creating a wall of repulsion all over the world because they are not taken serious.
Now I'm going to connect some dots, folks, and watch how we get there from here. We're going back to the continent, and this is how we get there. Connecting these dots. France invaded Haiti and failed. And we're talking about 1804. January 1st, I believe, 1804 is the date of French independence. The United States backed
independence.
The Haitian independence in 1804. The United States still backed France's play. France was in Vietnam before the United States, and the United States backed France's play in Vietnam. And then when France couldn't do it anymore, the United States took it over. Niger, just a French colony. The French were just thrown out of Niger, and now the United States is trying to back France's play against the alliance of Sahel states. With that, Francois, let's connect those dots.
My brother, you are bringing us to the most exciting development in Africa since decades. It started with Mali.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be long, but let me summarize the things. Mali asked the French army to go out, and the French refused. A new government arrived under a general called General Assimi Goïta. To show you how the former president was a puppet, the French government will tell him to do everything, and he will do. The French president, Macron, will take his plane and land in a city in Mali and invite the Malian president to come and see him. Can you imagine that? Imagine that the Chinese president flights to I don't know, to New Jersey and summon President Trump to come and see and visit it, and President Trump go there. So this was the type of relations that France had in Mali. This Assimi Goïta, who was fighting what they call the terrorists, when the French soldiers came in Mali, but the Malian army was successfully fighting the French, the terrorists, the jihadis, as they call them. And when they were pushing the jihadis up to a point, the French army stopped the advance of the Malian army on the Malian soil and said to the Malian army, you cannot cross this line, leave these terrorists alone, we are in charge. This Assimi Goïta was a soldier at that time, and he has said it many times. He was crazy, but he could not do anything. The French government not only stopped their advance as they were beating these invaders, but they were disarmed. The Malian army in Mali was disarmed to protect those who were invading and killing their people. So this Malian came back to Bamako and did a coup d'etat. Oh, I know people will say, oh, coup d'etat, these are dictatorship. And no. They are coup and coup. We have to have a very objective assessment, a comprehensive assessment of the situation before we condemn. I will never condemn a coup because it's a coup. Had it been a coup against Hitler, I would have applauded. So you cannot just say because it is a coup d'etat, you are against it. If the ruler is behaving, and by the way, again, in the United Nations Charter, it said that if the government is misbehaving, and I think that even in your constitution or in the Declaration of Independence of the United States, it says somewhere that the people can take arms if the government the government is not behaving properly. So this is what happened in Mali.
In fact, just really quickly, that's what the Declaration of Independence is. It was a letter written by the colonists to the king telling him, we're done with you. Here's what here are our complaints, and we will take up arms to leave you if we have to.
That is exactly what happened in Mali with this Assimi Goïta. So the French soldiers were there. Not only they were there, since they were accustomed to dominate the place, they brought soldiers from Italy, soldiers from Lithuania, soldiers from Denmark. So they were creating a new platform for a European unifying military under the code name called Barkhane, Operation Barkhane. This was supposed to be the embryo of a sort of united European army.
Okay.
This was the plan. And you saw Mali is a very vast territory, over 1,000,000 2 or 1,000,004 square kilometers. So you have land, you can train everything that you do. Mm-hmm. So the Malians said, please go away. And they refused. We say, what? What is dramatic here is that they always say that African countries are poor. Mm-hmm. But if you come to a poor man's house and he say, please, it's time for you to go, you should go. But
you shouldn't go there in the first place if he's so poor.
Yes, exactly. So let us go quick. So they succeeded in the coup, and eventually the French army was forced to go. They did not go back to France, by the way. They just translated into Niger, who was then under another puppet government. But in the meantime, you have a similar sort of coup in Burkina Faso. The first time, the coup was with a captain called, I forgot his name, and then there was a second coup, a coup in the coup. The second coup brought to power Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who is the current leader of the country. Mm-hmm. And then the climax, so to speak, was in Niger. And you know what I say, the climax? Because the United States was concerned. The United States has built, many Americans may not know, because they know that they don't advertise. Mm-hmm. Many American taxpayers do not know. In the middle of the desert, in the Agadez region, north of Niger, the United States built a military base that cost, to some estimate, $250 million to $300 million.
A drone base, isn't it?
Yes. And surveillance base. Why will the United States spend so much money, needed money, to build a military base in a desert Sahelian country? And the maintenance cost, listen to this, was estimated to be around $30 million per year. Mm. So what is the purpose of all this spending? But to their surprise, there was a coup also in Niger. It means that despite all the surveillance, they were incapable of seeing something coming. So in my view, if I were an American citizen, I would ask for the investigation of all these things. It is because people are not informed properly.
Correct.
And any ordinary American citizen should investigate the Department of Defense to ask the reason why they're building this coup and they are spending all this money abroad. Because, and this is my hypothesis, is that there are a lot of money laundering going on in the Department of Defense, and kickback coming back in Washington to enrich some sections of the United States. But this is another topic for another time.
Final, let me ask you this. Because there are a number of reports saying that a lot of weapons that were in Ukraine have now made their way into Niger and Mali, that some of the mercenaries that were in Syria are now in Niger and Mali, and that basically the United States has shifted its focus away from Ukraine and away from Syria, and even some of Al-Jilani's folks are now. So people, first of all, need to understand that ISIS is ISIS no matter what other name or they want to operate under, that we have been told for years that ISIS is our enemy, when in fact ISIS is operating as our proxy, and that a lot of the unrest that we're finding now in Burkina Faso, in Niger and Mali, the so-called Islamic or Muslim radicals are actually operating at the behest of the United States.
And written by a Cameroonian scholar called Professor Nyamsi, who demonstrated with facts what you have just said, that all these so-called jihadist groups are in reality the proxies of what we call generally the West, meaning the United States and their allies. Look, these people, these countries have been Muslim, in majority they are Muslim for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
You've never seen things like that. Secondly, you are launching a jihad in a Muslim country to do what? Who do you want to convert? So all these so-called terrorists of Islamic terrorists in Africa, at least in sub-Saharan Africa, as they said, come from abroad. Come from abroad. It's not ingrained. There's no reason. You are going to launch a jihad in Mali, a country which population is around, let's say, over 90% Muslim. What are you going to do? What purpose? What you are going to Islamize who? So most Africans are not well aware, and it is well established, that these are the proxies of those who pretend that they are fighting terrorism. And I will add two things, two informations, which are critical, which is critical here.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, the government of Mali went to the UN Security Council. Listen to this. Went to the UN Security Council in New York and put on a table a request that the UN Security Council should organize a meeting during which the government of Mali will bring the evidence that the French government is supporting the terrorists, the French government is arming the terrorists, the French government is financing the terrorists. That is 2 years ago. Do you know who opposed, who used their veto to oppose this request?
The United States.
Of course, and France and the UK. This was just a request to bring the proof. So if they were so confident, they would have allowed this meeting to take place so that the world will see if the evidence that the Malian wants to show are just bullshit, and they will be ashamed. The shame will be on the government of Mali, isn't it? But they refuse even to organize anything, that they refuse to see that what the government. I'm not saying that what the government, let me be clear. I'm not saying, I'm not taking part here. I'm a scholar. I just see the process. A fair process will be to say, oh, hey, Mali, you want a meeting? Okay, let us organize a meeting and bring your evidence, and the world will see. If you are stupid, you will be ashamed because your evidence doesn't show anything. This is the behavior of someone who doesn't fear, who is clear. But you are refusing to show the evidence. Suppose you are going to, you have a case in a tribunal and they're preventing you from bringing the evidence. or what you think is the evidence. That's the first thing. I said I will give you two things. The second one, on December, on the Christmas Day, on the last month, the president of Niger, Abdurrahman Chiani, gave a lengthy interview, and I would advise you to go and check this interview, and it is in the internet. Even though it is in French, you can translate and read something, or I would try to give you some. He is clear in this interview to show the fingers on the Western governments who have been financing, training, and bringing these so-called jihadists in Niger. Unfortunately, the voice of these leaders does not resonate in the international arena.
Mm-hmm.
So the big media do not talk about them. But this is a reality. And it is important that we hear what they are saying and look at the evidence that they're showing. If it's not, we will say it is a lie. But the simple fact that they are not ready to sit down and consider what they've said means that the suspicion is on their count. And finally, you quickly mentioned the issue of Ukraine and the weapons being there. Don't forget that President Buhari, even few months after the former president of Nigeria, few months after the special military operation that started on the 24th February 2022, few months after, President Buhari came out with a statement saying that we already seen the weapons in Ukraine here in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean? And link this also to an interview that Zelensky gave recently, I think 2 weeks or something like that, in which he said that the United States is claiming that they have helped up something like 150 billion, but we haven't seized half of the money.
Mm-hmm.
So this shows you the two-way corruptions: corruption in the government of Ukraine, corruption in those who are used from the USA and the allies who are using the funds, so the funds can disappear like the weapons are disappearing. And the final point, there was an attack by this group of terrorists in a city north of Mali that trapped and killed dozens of Malian soldiers and the Russian soldiers who are fighting with them.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after that, the ambassador of Ukraine in Senegal came out to rejoice, indicating that, and he said openly that they will continue to do that. So he was not only endorsing it, he was showing that this is a thing in which we are participating. This effect brought Mali to cut the relationship with Ukraine and the other countries. So there are some interesting development going on in Africa that people should follow.
Well, Francois Ndengwe, thank you, my dear brother, so much for that. I really look forward to bringing you back. I know my audience wants to hear you again, and this, you and I will start to have some regular conversations.
Thank you very much, and thank you to give me the opportunity to speak to the brother and sister over there. We are in the same fight. We continue the fight of the Du Bois and Marcus Garvey and people like that. Thank you.
I wanted to get into a discussion about what's happening with the politics in Europe, and we'll do that. We'll do that the next time we talk.
We'll do that next time, my brother. Thank you very much.
Thank you, folks. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Let me ask you all before you go, if you can hit that like button, please hit that like button before you go. Also, stay tuned. New episodes every day. We'll have a new episode tomorrow. Follow on social and subscribe. Follow on social media. Leave a review. Share the show. We're still trying to hit that 10,000 mark. We're close, but we need you all in order to hit that 10,000 mark. Follow us on social media. All the links to the show are below. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all again tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.